Explorers wasn't just another kid's sci-fi movie. The studio forced the director to release an unfinished rough cut. Both Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix made their film debuts and initially hated each other, and the entire final space battle was scrapped because Paramount moved the release date up by months.
Action-adventure comedy with science fiction elements.
Most fans don't realize this movie was never actually finished. Joe Dante has spent nearly 40 years wondering what it could have been if they'd just given him 2 more weeks. Today, we're exposing 16 hidden truths behind the movie that was never completed, and might have been a masterpiece. Let's get into it.
We are going where no man has gone before.
1. The unfinished movie. The version of Explorers that exists in the world is technically a rough cut, not a finished film. Paramount Pictures panicked when they looked at the production schedule and realized they were behind. They made the catastrophic decision to move the release date up by several months. This forced director Joe Dante to stop editing in the middle of working on the climax. He had to lock the film in whatever state it happened to be in at that moment. Dante famously said, "The movie you see is the movie I was still fixing."
Carbon dioxide. That's what you'd breathe on Mars.
He's never stopped being frustrated about it. The entire third act feels rushed and incomplete because it literally is incomplete. Dante never got to finish shaping the story, polishing the visual effects, or creating the emotional payoff he'd planned. One of the most extreme examples of studio interference destroying a film's potential. Dante has spent decades wondering what Explorers could have been if he'd just been given the time he needed. 2. Ethan Hawke. And River Phoenix's Rivalry Explorers was the feature film debut for both Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix. 2 actors who would go on to become major stars and defining voices of their generation. Initially, they absolutely did not get along. Hawke was a theater kid from New Jersey, trained and ambitious. Phoenix was a quiet, eccentric kid from a traveling counterculture family who approached acting instinctively rather than technically. They clashed over everything and made no effort to hide their mutual dislike. But during a late-night shoot that ran past midnight, they discovered a shared love of music. They spent hours talking about bands, songwriting, and their dreams beyond acting. That conversation transformed their relationship completely. They became lifelong best friends. Phoenix's tragic death in 1993 devastated Hawke. He's spoken about their friendship and this film many times over the years as a formative experience that shaped who he became, as both an actor and a person. 3. The Thunder Road Biohazard. The spaceship that the boys build, affectionately named the Thunder Road after the Bruce Springsteen song, was constructed out of real junkyard parts, including an actual tilt-a-whirl car from a defunct carnival ride. Because it was made from genuine scrap metal, old tires, and literal trash, the interior was incredibly cramped, poorly ventilated, and smelled absolutely terrible. The young actors frequently complained about getting minor cuts and scrapes just from sitting inside the cockpit. The production had to keep a first aid kit on standby for tetanus shots and bandages. Set medics were constantly worried about infections from rusty metal. Parents of the child actors weren't thrilled about their kids spending hours inside what was essentially a garbage pile. But the authenticity shows on screen. The Thunder Road looks and feels like something 3 kids actually built in a junkyard. Because it basically was. 4. The $3,000 per day alien. The alien character Hawke was played by Robert Picardo, who would later become famous as the holographic doctor on Star Trek, Voyager. His alien makeup was so elaborate and complex that it cost over $3,000 per day just to apply the prosthetics. An enormous amount of money for 1985. Because the makeup was so expensive and time-consuming to create, Picardo had to stay in the full alien suit for up to 15 hours at a time to maximize shooting efficiency. He ate his meals through a tiny hole in the alien's mouth. He couldn't see properly through the contact lenses. He suffered from heat exhaustion inside the rubber suit. Genuinely torturous. Picardo later said it was one of the most physically punishing roles of his entire career. But his commitment paid off. Hawke is one of the most memorable alien characters of the 1980s, and Picardo's performance shines through despite the layers of latex and foam obscuring his face. 5. The Stargate Connection. The shimmering energy bubble that surrounds the boys' spaceship was one of the most advanced visual effects of the 1980s. It was created by Industrial Light and Magic, using an innovative technique that involved filming light passing through swirling colored liquids, then compositing those images with the spacecraft footage. The result was a mesmerizing, organic-looking energy field that didn't look like typical sci-fi effects of the era. This exact shimmer effect became the primary visual inspiration for the event horizon water-like surface of the Stargate in the 1994 film Stargate. ILM essentially refined and improved the technique they'd pioneered on Explorers, proof that even a commercial failure can have lasting influence on the visual language of science fiction cinema. 6. River Phoenix's glasses secret. River Phoenix didn't actually need glasses in real life. He personally chose to wear them for his character Wolfgang specifically to make himself look more nerdy and intellectual, deliberately working against his natural good looks so he wouldn't come across as just another Hollywood pretty boy. A smart character choice that helped ground Wolfgang as a believable genius kid rather than a movie star playing dress-up. However, the prop department gave him glasses with extremely thick lenses that distorted his vision. Phoenix developed genuine headaches from wearing them for long shooting days. Eventually, the crew took pity on him and replaced the lenses with plain glass that didn't hurt his eyes. But by that point, Phoenix had already suffered through weeks of unnecessary discomfort just to look authentic. 7. Wolfgang's computer was real. The computer that Wolfgang uses to discover the alien transmission and decode the space travel circuit was an Apple IIc, at the time cutting-edge consumer technology. The production team wanted the computer scenes to look authentic to tech-savvy kids in the audience who would immediately call out anything fake or impossible. So they hired an actual computer programmer to sit just off camera during filming and type real code in real time. The text appearing on the screen isn't gibberish or random symbols. It's genuine programming that would actually compile and run, even if it obviously wouldn't create an anti-gravity field. That level of technical authenticity was unusual for 1980s movies, which typically treated computers as magic boxes that did whatever the plot required. Explorers took the technology seriously, and that respect shows in how the film has aged. 8. The Missing Space Battle. In the original screenplay, there was supposed to be a massive third-act action sequence, the boys trying to escape from a fleet of hostile alien ships that wanted to capture or destroy them. It would have been the big set-piece climax that gave the film traditional blockbuster structure and satisfied audience expectations for excitement and danger. Because Paramount slashed the budget and moved up the release date, the entire sequence was scrapped before it could be filmed. This is why the third act feels so talky and anticlimactic compared to the high-energy adventure of the first two acts. The movie was supposed to build to an explosive conclusion. Instead, it just sort of ends with philosophical conversations. The missing space battle is the ghost that haunts Explorers, the sequence that would have transformed it from an interesting oddity into a legitimate crowd pleaser. 9. Robert Picardo's improvised pop culture. All the bizarre pop culture references that the alien Hawke makes throughout his scenes, quoting Humphrey Bogart, imitating Little Richard, referencing old television shows and commercials, were improvised by Robert Picardo, not scripted. Picardo created an entire backstory in his head where the aliens had intercepted decades of Earth's television and radio broadcasts. They were essentially suffering from cultural information overload, having consumed humanity's entire media output without any context to understand what they were watching. This improvisation became the central thematic message of the film, about media consumption, cultural imperialism, and how we're defined by the images we create. What started as Picardo just trying to make the kids laugh on set turned into the intellectual heart of the movie. Joe Dante was smart enough to recognize it and build the entire alien encounter around that concept. 10. The Gremlins Cameo Joe Dante, who had just directed the massive hit Gremlins the year before, couldn't resist hiding several Easter eggs in Explorers. If you look very closely at the background of the junkyard scenes, you can spot a discarded gremlin puppet buried in the trash piles. Additionally, the mechanical sound of the alien ship's engine is actually a heavily distorted and pitch-shifted recording of a gremlin's growling vocalization. References so subtle that most viewers never notice them consciously, but they add to the playful meta quality that defines Dante's filmmaking style. He's always been a director who loves movies as much as he loves making them. He can't help leaving little love letters to his previous work scattered throughout his films. 11. The Dream Sequence Terror. The dream sequences where the boys fly through three-dimensional circuit board landscapes were filmed using massive, hand-painted floor sets that stretched over 100 feet in length. The actors were suspended on wires and physically flown across these enormous horizontal surfaces while the camera filmed from above, creating the illusion of weightless movement through abstract electronic space. Ethan Hawke later admitted he was absolutely terrified during those takes. He was suspended so high in the air and the safety equipment felt inadequate. The wire work was primitive by modern standards. There were multiple near accidents where actors swung too close to set pieces or lighting equipment. But the final result is genuinely dreamlike and surreal. One of the most visually inventive sequences in 1980s science fiction. Entirely practical, with no digital effects whatsoever. 12. The Live Aid Disaster Explorers opened on the exact same weekend as the Live Aid concert in July 1985, one of the biggest global media events of the decade. Virtually every teenager in America and Europe was glued to their television watching rock stars perform for charity. Movie theaters were completely empty that opening weekend. The timing couldn't have been worse. The film's target demographic was literally watching something else simultaneously. There was no way to compete with that level of cultural saturation. Explorers made only $9 million against its $25 million budget, a massive financial flop that effectively killed any chance of a sequel or franchise. The failure wasn't because audiences rejected the film. Most people simply never saw it because they were busy watching MTV coverage of Live Aid instead. 13. Jerry Goldsmith's Frustration. The musical score was composed by legendary film composer Jerry Goldsmith, the man who created some of the most iconic music in science fiction history: Star Trek, the motion picture, Alien, Total Recall. But Goldsmith was deeply frustrated by the constant re-editing and changes being forced on Explorers by the studio. He had to rewrite the main theme 3 completely different times to match the constantly shifting tone of the unfinished film. Every time he thought he understood what kind of movie he was scoring, the edit would change. Suddenly, his music didn't fit anymore. Despite this chaos, Goldsmith still managed to create a beautiful, adventurous score that captures the wonder and excitement of childhood discovery. One of the few elements of Explorers that was genuinely completed and polished. It deserved a better film to accompany it. 14. Predicting virtual reality. The film's central concept, using a computer program to generate a tangible energy field that constructs a physical spaceship, is now cited by virtual reality developers and 3D printing pioneers as an early inspiration for their work. The idea that a digital program could manifest in the physical world was decades ahead of the technology we have today. It anticipated debates about the relationship between software and hardware, between information and matter, that are still ongoing in tech circles. Explorers understood that the most revolutionary technologies would be the ones that blur the line between the virtual and the real. That insight was far more sophisticated than most 1980s science fiction, which still treated computers as glorified calculators. The film imagined a future where code becomes reality. We're living in that future now. 15. The alien voice censorship. The studio was extremely nervous about how the aliens would sound and whether they would be too scary for children. In the original voice recordings, the aliens sounded much more monstrous, garbled, and genuinely alien. Unsettling and difficult to understand. But Paramount executives feared that if the aliens didn't sound funny or friendly, kids would be too frightened to see the movie or buy the inevitable toy line they were planning. They pressured Joe Dante to completely re-record all the alien dialogue to make it sound high-pitched, cartoonish, and non-threatening. Dante felt this change infantilized the movie's deeper themes about first contact, cultural misunderstanding, and the dangers of communication breakdown. The final alien voices are played for laughs instead of wonder. It fundamentally changed the tone of the entire third act from mysterious to silly. 16. The missing ending. There's a persistent legend among fans and film historians about a lost ending that was scripted but never filmed, because of the rushed production. In this version, the boys actually bring the aliens back to Earth and orchestrate a massive ET-style landing in the junkyard, proving to the world that they weren't crazy and that first contact had really happened. A triumphant emotional conclusion that would have vindicated the characters and given the film a proper crowd-pleasing finale. Instead, because Paramount refused to give Dante the time or budget to shoot it, they had to film a much smaller, more ambiguous, spiritual ending. The boys just have another dream and the adventure continues off-screen. Joe Dante has stated in multiple interviews that if he had just been given 2 more weeks and a modest effects budget increase, he could have delivered the blockbuster ending the film truly deserved. Explorers might have been remembered as a classic instead of a fascinating failure. 2 more weeks, that's all he needed. So do you think Explorers is an unfinished masterpiece or just an incomplete dream? This is a movie that shows what happens when studios panic and rush art into the world before it's ready. Which behind-the-scenes fact surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. If you want more deep dives into the science fiction classics that almost didn't happen, hit subscribe. See you in the next one.